We will now move to the motion before the House this evening. This House believes individual apathy is the greatest threat to our climate. I now look to Robert Paver, St Anne's College, to open the case for the proposition.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. President. Many momentous motions have been debated here, in this very room, from whether to fight for king and country, to whether to have confidence in Her Majesty's government, to whether this country should have membership of the European Union. Yet, while these motions are vastly important, I strongly believe that the significance of these pales in comparison to what we are debating here tonight. The very fact that we are discussing climate change in this very chamber means we are engaging with it in a way many others aren't. Outside of here, countless people, and I know I can often be included among these, do not fully consider the issues at hand and what is at stake. Yet, climate change is on the news almost every day. We constantly receive warnings about what is happening, and we know that the vast majority of scientists agree about what is causing this change. But most of us take this in, and most of us do nothing. Although in a different context, a quote from Hotel Rwanda perfectly sums this up. A Rwandan hotelier thanks a journalist for publishing pictures of the genocide to the world. But the journalist turns to the hotelier and says, "I think if people see this footage, they'll say, 'Oh, my goodness, that's horrible.' And then they'll go on eating their dinners." And this can be seen with climate change. We all observe the warming planet. We see the melting ice sheets on the television almost every day. And we know about the burning of fossil fuels. And we do nothing. We go back to living our everyday lives. But if we all engaged in the issue, we really could make a difference, both on our own and by influencing those who have the power to change business and industry practices. But before I continue, it falls on me to introduce tonight's opposition. First of all, we have Kris Garner, a fellow member of Oxford Union Committee, and someone who I have had the pleasure to get to know this term. Apparently, Kris has a habit of telling everyone that he has done no work, even really when he has done loads. Although, I don't know how you can actually do lots of work if you study PPE, but there we go. Next, we have Secretary Ernest Moniz, the former US Secretary of Energy and the current CEO and co-chairman of the Nuclear Threat Initiative. Following on from him is President Mohamed Nasheed, the first democratically elected president of the Maldives, and known internationally for his work on climate change. And last but not least, we have Natalie Bennett, someone who we may be familiar with from the 2015 general election campaign, and the former leader of the Green Party in England and Wales. Mr. President, these are your opposition speakers, and they are most welcome. It's well known that humans only ever really respond to short-term issues, and not long-term ones, If I had a cricket ball here and threw it at Kris, he would instinctively move out of the way. If the Thames was flooding right now, we would try and stop it and look at how we could prevent this from happening again in the future. But when we say that climate change is an issue that could catastrophically alter our planet by 2100, we think that it is too far off to be something which will affect us or those around us in our generations. And yet, if sea levels started rising so significantly due to these melting ice sheets, and London, New York, and other great global cities became inundated with water and flooding, we would instinctively panic and try to start and do something about the issue and address the root cause of this problem. It's been this way for tens of thousands of years. As a species, this sort of short-term thinking is wired into us and has been wired into the way we evolve. We can't change this. We can't change our makeup, our DNA. As a result, we underestimate the extent of the problems which will threaten us in the future and downplay the urgency of these potential future emergencies. Instead, we over-prioritize our everyday lives, our Netflix, our careers, our friends. True, these are important, and especially the Netflix. But it shouldn't be as all-consuming as they are. We can try and alter the way we think about things. We already think into the long term in a way other animals don't. For instance, and I know these aren't exactly the best examples, but we plan for our pensions and we make sure that our future generations are well looked after. And when we recognize that 100 years is not actually that long a time in terms of generations of humans, we may take heed. And this is where a vital connection needs to be made. 70 years does sound a long time, and 120 years sounds even longer. But when you realize that this is the age at which most of your children and grandchildren retire, it really puts it into perspective. And when we realize that the planet could have warmed by 3 degrees by then, it really does hit home that millions of people would be displaced, droughts would be commonplace, and, for instance, the Amazon rainforests would be significantly reduced in size. But let's now turn our attention to Australia. In Australia, more people are starting to believe that climate change has an anthropogenic cause, that humans are causing it. And in mid-2016, polls showed that around 60% of the citizens in this country accepted that we, as humans, are behind climate change. And presumably the majority of these knew the dangers associated with it. Yet, where was climate change as a voting issue in the federal elections of July 2016? The top voting issue was quality of healthcare. The third most important voting issue was protecting local industries and Australian jobs. The 8th most important voting issue was political leadership, while addressing climate change was the 10th most important issue for voters, and only 12% of those polled put this as one of their top 3 priorities. Healthcare, jobs, and effective leadership are important and should be top priorities. But to have something as damaging as climate change as such a low voting concern is, quite frankly, a failure on all our behalves to properly engage with the issue. We all know that catastrophes are happening around the world, yet, and I know I am certainly guilty of this, we believe that these things will happen to someone else, and not to us. For instance, we don't really think that flooding will occur when we are in an area. We don't think that we will ever be caught in an earthquake. And we certainly never think that we will end up in somewhere such as a war zone. And we can look at this closer to home too. Do we ever really think that our houses will be burgled, for instance, or that we will ever be hit by lightning? Some of these things do have a very low chance of actually happening, yes, but they can occur. And it's the same with climate change. This is happening all over the world, and the effects could reach us here in the UK, over in the US, and not just affect people in countries such as the Maldives and Bangladesh. It's not just a problem that will affect others in the world. It will affect us all. And our blatant inability to see this is a tragedy of the greatest kind. And this leads me on to my last point. The opposition tonight may argue that lack of government regulation and dangerous business practices are the main threat to our climate. If we are ever going to combat climate change and mitigate its effects, changing government views and industry practice is incredibly important, and I'll be the first to admit that. But who elects governments? Who shapes politicians' views? And who really has the ability to make that difference? It's you, it's me, it's us here in this chamber. But with widespread climate apathy among individuals, however, how can we ever truly get those to have the power to shape regulation and business to listen to us? As I close today, I look to borrow a phrase from former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. On climate change, we often don't fully appreciate that it is a problem. We think it is a problem waiting to happen. And so I ask us all to go and persuade those people outside of the chamber who I mentioned at the very beginning, to start to engage with the facts of climate change, to truly think about the problem at hand. Our planet is a fragile place, and only if we remove this individual apathy can we truly hope to save it. Honourable members, I urge you, in fact, I implore you to vote for the proposition tonight so we can help protect our environment, help protect our planet, and above all, help protect our future. Please remember to walk out the right-hand door on your way out. Thank you very much.